They thought the massacre broke her. They thought the blizzard would finish her. But they were wrong about Thessaly Ravenscar. The Alpha King wasn't looking for a mate. He was hunting the one who could amplify his power tenfold, the weapon that could tip the balance of a war he didn't yet know he was fighting. And Thessaly was about to become his greatest strength and his only weakness.
The time for waiting is over.
That's how
we
long
are
she'd
with
been
you.
running. 3
Let's
weeks
move.
earlier, the
Then
cellar
let us
smelled
go.
like earth and wine and fear. Thessaly pressed her spine against the cold stone wall, both hands clamped over her mouth to silence the sound of her breathing. Above her, the floor shook. Wood splintered, glass shattered, and people she loved were dying. Her mother's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and desperate. Thess, stay down. Whatever you hear, don't come up. Promise me. She wanted to scream, wanted to tear up those cellar stairs and fight beside them. But her wolf was too small, too weak. Omega blood. Her father had called it a blessing, once said it meant she'd live a peaceful life. He'd been wrong about that. The cellar door stood open just enough for her to see through the crack. Firelight danced across the gap, orange and gold and hungry. The heat pressed against her face like a palm. Her mother's face appeared in the opening. Ilara Ravenscar, the pack healer. The woman who'd taught Thessaly to identify herbs by scent alone. Blood ran from a gash above her eye. Her clothes were torn, but her hands were steady when she gripped the doorframe. Remember everything, she whispered. Your memory is your gift. Use it. Then she was gone. Thessaly's photographic memory captured every detail with cruel precision. The way her mother's silver hair had come loose from its braid. The exact shade of crimson staining her dress. The smell of smoke mixing with the copper tang of blood. She heard her father roar. Thomas Ravenscar, the pack's head warrior, a man who'd never lost a fight. The roar cut off mid-sound. Something heavy hit the floor above her head. Thess, her brother's voice. Finian, 14 years old, too young for this, too young to die. Thess, where are you? She bit down on her palm until she tasted blood. Stay quiet, stay hidden, survive. Footsteps crossed the floor above, measured, unhurried. A man's voice, cold and cultured, gave orders. Burn it all, leave no witnesses. Another voice responded. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was eager. Willing. The footsteps came closer. Thessaly shrank back, pressed herself into the darkest corner. Through the crack in the door, she saw him. The man in charge. The killer. He moved through the firelight like a shadow, tall and lean. His face held sharp angles and cold intelligence. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, pulling it into a permanent sneer. When he rolled up his sleeves to avoid the blood splatter, she saw the tattoo on his wrist. Military precise. Distinctive. A wolf's head surrounded by 13 stars. Her memory burned it all in. Every line, every Yeri's detail. The way his dark hair fell across his forehead. The cruel twist of his mouth when he smiled at the carnage. The complete absence of remorse in his eyes. Finish it, he said. Then he was gone. Thessaly waited in the dark. Waited while the house burned above her. Waited while the screaming stopped. Waited until the only sound was the crackle of flames and the groan of collapsing wood. When she finally climbed out, the Silver Pine pack was gone. 147 wolves, dead in a single night, and she was the only one left to remember. Present day. The blizzard hit 3 hours faster than predicted. Thessaly had been tracking the storm since dawn, watching the clouds mass over the northern peaks like a gathering army. She'd hoped to reach the next town before it broke. Hoped for a lot of things that hadn't come true. The first snowflakes fell like warnings, soft, delicate. Then the wind picked up and the world turned white. She pulled her cloak tighter and kept walking. 3 weeks of sleeping rough had taught her things the pack elders never had. How to start a fire with flint in the rain. Which tree bark could be chewed to stave off hunger. How to keep moving when your body begged you to lie down and let the cold take you. The temperature dropped. Her fingers went numb inside her gloves. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps that burned her lungs. Ice crusted her eyelashes. Omega. Weak bloodline. Useless. The words had followed her from pack to pack. She tried to find shelter in 3 different territories. All of them had turned her away. Rogues weren't welcome, especially rogues who carried the stink of death and disaster. The wind screamed, snow drove into her face like needles. She couldn't see more than 2 feet ahead, couldn't feel her toes anymore. Her wolf whimpered somewhere deep inside, begging for warmth, for safety, for a den. There was no den. There was only forward. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Photographic recall meant Thessaly could replay every conversation, every lesson, every moment with perfect clarity, a blessing her mother had called it. Most days it felt like a curse. Look for shelter, find water, Keep your core temperature up. The words steadied her. Thessaly scanned the white chaos, looking for any break in the storm. There, a darker shadow to her left. She stumbled toward it. Her legs barely responded. Exhaustion dragged at her like hands pulling her down. The shadow resolved into an overhang of rock. Not deep enough to be a cave, but enough to block the worst of the wind. She collapsed into it, shaking so hard her teeth clattered. Fire. She needed fire. Her pack held flint and steel wrapped in oilcloth to keep them dry. Her hands shook too badly to strike a spark. 3 tries. 4. On the 5th, a spark caught in the bundle of dried moss she'd been carrying for days. She coaxed it into flame with hands that felt like blocks of ice. The fire grew. Heat radiated against her face. Thessaly closed her eyes and focused on breathing. 4 counts in, hold. 4 counts out. The technique her mother had taught her for panic attacks worked almost as well for hypothermia. When the shaking subsided, she assessed her situation with the clinical detachment of her healer training. Frostbite on 3 fingers and both feet, mild hypothermia, dehydration, exhaustion so deep it felt like her bones were made of lead. She had maybe 2 days before her body gave out completely. Around her, the storm raged. Inside the overhang, the fire crackled. Thessaly pulled her knees to her chest and stared into the flames. Somewhere in the white hell beyond her shelter, there had to be a town, a village, anything. She just had to survive long enough to reach it. The storm broke on the 2nd day. Thessaly emerged from her shelter into a world transformed. Snow covered everything in drifts that reached her waist. The sun blazed against the white landscape bright enough to hurt her eyes. She'd managed to treat the worst of her frostbite with what little she knew. Her fingers were pink and painful but functional. Her feet would carry her a bit further. She walked. The sun climbed. The snow sparkled. And ahead finally she saw smoke rising from chimneys. Civilization. Gray Hollow was barely large enough to call a village. Maybe 40 buildings clustered around a central square. But it had walls and warmth and people. Thessaly's wolf stirred with desperate hope. She stumbled to the gates. 2 guards stood watch, both wearing the gray and brown of minor pack territory. They saw her coming, watched her approach with flat, assessing eyes. "Rogue," one of them said. "Not a question, a statement." Thessaly stopped 10 feet from the gate. "Protocol. You didn't approach pack territory without permission. Not unless you wanted to die." "I need shelter," she said. Her voice came out rough, unused. "Just for the night. I can work. I'm a healer." The guards exchanged glances. One of them disappeared into the village. Thessaly waited. Her legs trembled. The wound on her arm from a fall 2 days ago throbbed with infection. The guard returned with an older woman, the village elder judging by the silver in her hair and the authority in her bearing. She looked Thessaly up and down with cold, measuring eyes. "You're the Silver Pine survivor." Word traveled fast in pack territory. Thessaly lifted her chin. "Yes." "Omega, weak bloodline, only one left alive." Each word landed like a blow. Thessaly kept her face blank, showed nothing. The elder's lip curled. "Do you know what we call wolves who survive when their entire pack dies?" Thessaly said nothing. "Cursed. Cowards. Death follows you, girl. We don't harbor bad luck." A crowd had gathered, 30, maybe 40 people, all of them staring, all of them judging. Thessaly recognized the looks. She'd seen them in every territory she'd tried to enter. Fear, disgust, the assumption that if she'd survived, she must have done something wrong. "I just need one night," she said quietly. "You need to leave before you bring whatever killed your pack down on us." The elder gestured to the guards. "Send her back out. Please, I'll freeze." "Should have thought of that before you let your pack die." The words hit harder than a fist. Thessaly swayed. The guard grabbed her arm and shoved her back the way she'd come. Her feet slipped in the snow. She caught herself before she fell. Behind her, the crowd muttered, "Cursed, broken, trash. Die where you belong, alone." The gates closed with a sound like finality. Thessaly stood in the snow and watched the village turn its back on her. Warmth and safety so close, and completely out of reach. Her wolf howled inside her chest, lost, abandoned, rejected. But Thessaly didn't cry. Hadn't cried since the night her pack died. Instead, she turned north and started walking. Away from Gray Hollow, away from everyone who thought she was cursed. The cold bit deeper. The sun started its descent toward the horizon. And Thessaly walked on because stopping meant dying, and she'd survived too much to give up now. 3 miles from Gray Hollow she saw it, a building rising from the snow-covered landscape like a gift. The Crossroads Inn. The inn glowed with lamplight and promise. Thessaly's legs nearly gave out on the front steps. She caught herself on the railing, forced herself upright, and pushed through the door. Heat washed over her like a blessing. The common room buzzed with conversation. A fire roared in the massive stone hearth. The smell of food made her stomach clench with hunger she'd been ignoring for days. An older man behind the bar looked up. His eyes went wide. "Gods above, girl, you look half frozen." Thessaly managed 3 steps before her knees buckled. Strong hands caught her. The innkeeper guided her to a chair by the fire. Someone pressed a mug of something hot into her hands. She drank without tasting it. "I need a room," she said when she could speak. "Please, I can pay." The innkeeper's face went sympathetic and apologetic in equal measure. "I wish I could help you. Merchant caravan came through 2 hours ago. Booked every room I have." The warmth that had started to seep into her bones fled. Everything, everything except the corner suite, but that's already taken. Lord Stevenson claimed it this morning. He hesitated. "You could sleep here by the fire. It's not much, but—" "No." A voice cut through the room, deep, male, authoritative. "She'll freeze." Thessaly turned. The man standing by the stairs made the rest of the room fade to insignificance. He stood at least 6.5 feet tall, broad-shouldered and muscular, in a way that spoke of violence and power. His travel clothes cost more than everything Thessaly had ever owned. Dark hair fell across a face that managed to be beautiful and dangerous at the same time, and his eyes, storm gray and intense, locked onto her with an impact that stole her breath. The mate bond hit like lightning. The world tilted. Sound rushed in her ears. Her wolf surged forward with a howl of recognition that nearly forced her to shift right there in the common room. "Mine, mate. Ours." The man's nostrils flared, his pupils dilated, his entire body went rigid as if he'd been struck. For 3 heartbeats, they stared at each other while something fundamental rearranged itself in the space between them. Then his jaw tightened. A muscle ticked. His hands flexed at his sides like he was physically restraining himself. "The bed is sufficient for 2 adults," he said, voice carefully controlled. "We'll share it." The innkeeper blinked. "My lord, are you certain?" "I'm certain." His eyes hadn't left Thessaly's face. "Miss Ravenscar, Thessaly Ravenscar. Miss Ravenscar can take the suite. I'll find other arrangements." "Absolutely not." The words came out before Thessaly could stop them. The bond pulled at her, painful and demanding, making the thought of him leaving feel dangerous. "Wrong. You were here first. I'll take the floor." His expression flickered. Surprise, maybe. "You'll freeze on the floor." "Better than imposing." They stared at each other. The air between them felt charged. Electric. The innkeeper glanced from one to the other like he was watching a chess match he didn't understand. Finally, the man, Lord Stevenson, exhaled slowly. "We'll share, like adults. The room is large enough." The room was indeed large. It was also dominated by a massive 4-poster bed that seemed to mock the entire concept of platonic coexistence. Thessaly stood in the doorway, dripping melted snow onto expensive carpets, and tried not to think about spending the night in that bed with a man whose scent was already driving her wolf insane. Cedar and smoke and winter rain. It wrapped around her senses and squeezed. He'd claimed the left side. His belongings were already arranged with military precision. Travel documents spread across the desk. A sword propped against the wall. Everything about his half of the room screamed control and discipline. "The bathroom is through there." He gestured without looking at her directly. "You should warm up." He trailed off, seemingly unsure what he'd do while she was gone. Thessaly grabbed her pack and fled to the bathroom before this could get any more awkward. The hot water was a revelation. She stood under the stream until feeling returned to her extremities in painful pins and needles, until her core temperature climbed back toward normal, until she could think about something other than immediate survival. Then she thought about the mate bond and immediately wished she could go back to worrying about frostbite. She'd given up on finding him. After her pack died, after she became a rogue, she'd assumed the universe had decided she didn't deserve that kind of happiness. And now here he was offering to share his bed platonically, while his body obviously disagreed with every fiber of its being. When she emerged, he was sitting at the desk, staring at his documents, without seeming to actually read them. He'd changed into sleep clothes, simple but expensive, and his hair was slightly damp. He must have used the second bathroom she'd noticed off the main room. "You can take the bed," he said to the documents. "I'll take the floor." "Don't be ridiculous." Thessaly crossed to the bed. "We're both adults. We can share a bed without it being weird." His shoulders tensed. "I don't think that's wise." Because of the bond, he finally looked at her. The intensity in his gray eyes made her breath catch. "Yes." I'm not going to attack you in your sleep. She sat on the bed deliberately casual, and you don't seem like the type to lose control. She watched him struggle with it, watched him weigh options and outcomes with the precision of someone used to making tactical decisions. Finally, he nodded. Pillows, in the middle. He built the barrier himself. 3 large pillows arranged down the center of the bed with the focus of a man fortifying a castle wall. His ears turned red while he did it. Thessaly bit back a smile. It was sweet in a completely neurotic way. They lay down on opposite edges of the mattress, both rigid, neither touching the pillow wall. The bed was enormous, but somehow the space felt impossibly small. Every breath brought his scent. Every tiny shift of the mattress reminded her he was there just inches away, close enough to touch. Her wolf wanted to climb over the pillows and press against him, wanted to feel safe for the first time in 3 weeks. She heard him breathing, careful, measured, felt him shift slightly, heard the rustle of fabric. He was uncomfortable. Not just physically, though. She'd noticed the way he'd positioned himself before lying down, strategic and careful, but emotionally too. The bond pulled at him the same way it pulled at her. Good night, she whispered into the darkness. A long pause. Then, good night, Miss Ravenscar. Thessaly, if we're sharing a bed, you can use my name. Another pause, longer this time. Good night, Thessaly. The way he said it, careful and deliberate, made something warm unfurl in her chest. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep. The nightmares were waiting. Fire, blood, screaming. Her mother's face pressed against the cellar door, mouthing "run," while smoke filled the space behind her. Her father's roar cutting off mid-sound. Her little brother calling for her, crying for her, and she couldn't help, couldn't move, could only hide like a coward while they died. The killer's face appeared in the flames, scar above his left eyebrow, tattoo on his wrist, smiling while her family burned. Thessaly woke screaming. Strong hands gripped her shoulders, grounding her. A voice cut through the panic, calm and absolutely certain. Breathe with me. 4 counts in. Hold. 4 counts out. She gasped. The air wouldn't come. Her chest was too tight, her heart racing like prey. Focus on my voice. The man, Lord Stevenson, knelt on the bed beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. No pity in his eyes. No fear. Just absolute grounding certainty. In 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4. She tried, gulped air. Her lungs wouldn't cooperate. With me. His hands stayed on her shoulders, steady and sure. Out 2, 3, 4. She latched onto his voice like a lifeline. Breathed when he told her to breathe. Held when he said hold. Exhaled when he counted her through it. Slowly, so slowly, the world came back into focus. The nightmare receded. She became aware of the tears on her face. The way she was trembling. The humiliation burning through her chest. I'm sorry, she managed. Her voice came out broken. I'm fine. Go back to sleep. He settled back onto his side of the bed but didn't look away from her. The pillow barrier was gone, scattered across the bed in her panic. Nightmares are nothing to apologize for. She wanted to argue, wanted to rebuild her walls, wanted to pretend she was fine. But the words came anyway, quiet and broken in the darkness. My pack was killed 3 weeks ago. I'm the only one left. The silence stretched. Then his hand found hers on the mattress, warm and solid and real. He squeezed once. When he spoke, there was no pity in his voice, just acknowledgement. I'm sorry. Not how awful or you poor thing or everything happens for a reason. Just I'm sorry. Just recognition that something terrible had happened and there were no words to fix it. Thessaly's throat tightened. She squeezed his hand back, holding on like he was the only thing keeping her anchored to the world. My parents died 20 years ago. Coop, I was 11. His voice was matter-of-fact, but she heard the old pain underneath. They hid me in a secret passage in the walls. I listened to them die too. I'm sorry. He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. We're both survivors. Maybe that's enough. Maybe we understand each other in ways other people can't. They fell asleep like that, hands linked across the ruined pillow barrier. 2 people who'd survived impossible things, finding unexpected comfort in shared darkness. Morning came too soon and too awkwardly. Thessaly woke to warmth and safety and the smell of cedar and smoke wrapping around her. It took her sleep-fogged brain several seconds to realize she was plastered against Lord Stevenson's chest, his arm around her waist, her leg thrown over his hip. They were tangled together like lovers, like they'd done this 1,000 times before. His eyes opened, met hers, went wide with horror. He shot out of bed like she'd burned him, immediately crossing to the window with his back to her. She noticed he grabbed his coat on the way, held it strategically in front of himself. You know I can smell the arousal, right? The words were out before she could stop them. His shoulders went rigid. I apologize. It's involuntary around mates. She should probably be offended or uncomfortable. Instead, she found it oddly endearing. This controlled, powerful man completely undone by basic biology. I'm not complaining. She sat up stretched. Noticed the way his shoulders tensed further when she moved like he was tracking her position without looking. Just saying you don't have to be embarrassed. His jaw tightened, visible even from behind. I meant to maintain control. Interesting. She filed that away. The intensity of it. The way he said control like it was the foundation of his entire identity. Control is overrated, she offered. Not in my position. What position is that? He turned, finally, face carefully neutral, except for the muscle ticking in his jaw. It's complicated. Fair enough. They were strangers who'd accidentally trauma bonded over nightmares in an inconvenient mate bond. She wasn't entitled to his life story just because the universe had decided they belonged together. The storm hasn't let up, he said, changing the subject. We're likely stuck here another day at least. Another day. Another night in this room, in that bed. Thessaly looked at the massive four-poster and tried not to think about how good it had felt to wake up in his arms. Then I guess we'd better figure out how to be roommates. His lips twitched in something that might have been a smile. I suppose we should. The second day passed in strange, suspended intimacy. The inn sent up breakfast. They arranged it on the small table by the window, sitting across from each other, like this was a perfectly normal situation and not the universe's idea of torture. He ate with the same precision he seemed to apply to everything else. Neat, controlled bites. Perfect posture. She half expected him to produce a ruler to ensure his cup was exactly centered on its saucer. Do you always eat like you're at a state dinner? She asked, spreading honey on her bread with deliberate messiness. His lips twitched, almost a smile. Old habits. Must have been some upbringing. It was structured. She waited for him to elaborate. He didn't. Instead, he took another precise bite of porridge while watching her over the rim of his cup. Every time she moved, reaching for the honey, shifting in her chair, tucking hair behind her ear, his eyes tracked the movement like she was a threat he needed to monitor. It should have been uncomfortable. Instead, she found it oddly flattering. This powerful, controlled man, completely undone by basic proximity. After breakfast, Thessaly pulled out her sketchbook. Drawing had always helped process her anxiety, gave her hands something to do when her mind wanted to spiral. She curled up in the chair by the window and started sketching the storm, the way the snow created abstract patterns against the glass. You're talented. She glanced up to find him watching her from the desk, his documents apparently forgotten. My mother taught me, said it was important to see the world clearly, to remember details. She sounds wise. She was. Past tense. The word hurt. She was a lot of things. He didn't offer platitudes, just nodded and went back to his papers. But she noticed he kept looking up while watching her draw with something that looked almost like longing. Where were you headed? He asked after a while. Before the storm. Thessaly shrugged, shading the curve of a snowdrift. Nowhere specific, just away. From everywhere, anywhere that doesn't have packed territory. She paused. Anywhere that doesn't smell like death. He went very still, his papers forgotten. When he spoke, his voice was careful. The man who killed them. You saw him. She looked up, met his eyes, saw the sharp intelligence there, the way he'd gone from casual conversation to full alert in an instant. I have a photographic memory. I remember everything. Something flickered across his face. Everything. His face, his voice, the tattoo on his wrist. She set down her charcoal. Why, you know something about pack murders? A long pause. She watched him make a decision. Saw the exact moment he chose to trust her. I'm investigating them. 4 packs in 3 months. All slaughtered. No survivors. Until me. Until you. He stood slowly crossed to where she sat, crouched beside her chair, bringing himself to eye level, close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his gray eyes. Can you draw him, the man you saw? Her hands started shaking before she even reached for the charcoal. Drawing him meant reliving it, meant pulling up every detail she'd been trying desperately to bury. The cruel smile as he'd given orders. The casual way he'd stepped over bodies. The blood on his hands. Thessaly, his voice gentle but firm. I understand if you can't, but if you can, if you remember, it might help stop him from doing this to other packs. That decided it. She flipped to a fresh page and started drawing. The face came easily burned into her memory like a brand. Sharp features, prominent cheekbones, eyes that held nothing but cold calculation. She sketched quickly, precisely, adding details as they surfaced. The thin scar above his left eyebrow, the way his hair fell across his forehead, and there on his wrist visible when he'd rolled up his sleeve to avoid blood splatter, the tattoo. Military precise. Distinctive. A wolf's head surrounded by 13 stars. She finished and held it out to him, not looking at the sketch herself. Couldn't bear to see that face rendered in her own hand. His reaction told her everything. His face went carefully blank, that controlled mass, slamming into place so fast she knew she'd hit something important. The tattoo, he said, quietly. You're certain exactly like this. I told you I remember everything. He stood abruptly, crossed to the window, his back rigid. She watched his hands clench into fists at his sides. You know him, Thessaly said. Not a question. Long silence. The wind howled against the glass. Finally, I might. I need to be sure. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give right now. Frustration spiked through her, hot and sharp. She stood crossing to him. My entire pack is dead. I watched them die, and you're telling me you might know who did it, but you can't tell me because you need to be sure. It's complicated. It's really not. Either you know him or you don't. I said I need to be certain before I make accusations. His alpha presence flared suddenly, filling the room like physical pressure. It crashed over her in waves, making her wolf whimper and bow, making her knees want to buckle from the sheer weight of it. Then something else happened. Something impossible. The power amplified, doubled, tripled. His alpha presence bounced back at him tenfold, filling every corner of the room until they were both gasping, until he staggered back from the window, until they were drowning in it. Then it cut off completely. They stared at each other, both breathing hard. What did you just do? He demanded. What did I do? You're the one who went all alpha dominant. That wasn't me. I mean, it was, but he ran a hand through his hair, destroying its careful order. That amplification, that was you. You took my power and echoed it back somehow. Thessaly's legs felt weak. She sat down hard on the bed. I don't know what you're talking about. Have you ever done that before? I don't even know what I did. He was looking at her differently now, not like a mate or a woman or even a witness, like a puzzle he needed to solve. There are legends, wolves who can amplify others' abilities. Echoes, they're considered myth. I've never actually met one. Well, surprise. Her voice came out sharp, brittle. Apparently I'm a myth. But her hands were shaking, her mind racing. Is this why they died? Because of me? Because someone knew what I could do and wanted to make sure I never learned to use it, Thessaly. He crossed to her, crouched in front of her again. This isn't your fault. You don't know that. I know that whatever you are, whatever you can do, you didn't kill your pack. Someone else did. And we're going to find out who. The certainty in his voice steadied her. She looked up, met his eyes. Promise? I promise, Valpas. The moment stretched, charged with possibility and truth in the weight of things unspoken. Finally, Thessaly took a breath. Who are you really? He held her gaze. Then quietly, my name isn't just Lord Stevenson. It's Kalen Nightshade. I'm the Alpha King. The world stopped. Thessaly stared at him, waiting for the punchline. For him to crack a smile and admit he was joking. But his expression remained serious, almost apologetic. You're what? I'm the Alpha King. I was investigating undercover. Heard about the attacks in this region. Thought I'd have better luck getting information if people didn't know who I was. She laughed, high and slightly hysterical. The awkward bedmate who blushed every time she looked at him was the most powerful wolf in the kingdom. The man who'd built pillow barriers and stammered about involuntary reactions ruled over thousands. You're serious? Yes. Thessaly sank down onto the bed legs, suddenly weak. So the involuntary reactions, his jaw tightened, only happen with you because you're my mate. I can't, he paused, the words clearly difficult. Around you, I can't maintain the control I've built my entire reign on. She saw how much that admission cost him, saw the fear underneath, the vulnerability he was desperately trying to hide. This wasn't just about physical attraction or awkward morning situations. This was about his entire identity, the foundation of who he'd made himself into. And you think that's weakness? She said softly. I think it's dangerous for both of us. He crossed to her. I've led through control, through certainty. The moment I appear weak, there are those who would take advantage. And you, if people knew you were my mate, you'd become the easiest target to use against me. Were you ever going to tell me who you were? I'm telling you now. He reached into his coat, pulled out the sketch she'd drawn. And I need you to know, the man in your sketch, the tattoo, it matches the mark of my Royal Intelligence Division. Her blood ran cold. You think someone on your staff? I think the man who killed your pack is Corvus Ashenmore, my head of intelligence, my childhood friend. The betrayal in his voice was raw, barely controlled. Thessaly could see him struggling with it. This man who prided himself on control facing a truth that threatened to break him. He spread a map on the bed beside her, weighted down the corners with books from the nightstand. His finger traced routes marked in ink. Every massacre lines up with Corvus's investigation tour. His voice cracked slightly. He was supposedly tracking the raiders, but now he couldn't finish. Why would he do that? I don't know. Kalen's hand curled into a fist on the map. But we're going to find out, and you're the only living witness who can identify him. Silence stretched between them. Wind whispered through the gaps in the window frame, bringing the scent of pine and fresh snow. If you come with me, Kalen said, finally looking directly at her, you'll be in danger. He'll know I suspect him. He'll come for you. Thessaly stood, looked at the map, at all those marks indicating death and destruction. Looked at this man who just revealed everything, his identity, his suspicions, his weakness, because he thought she deserved the truth. He already killed everyone I loved, she said. I'm not running anymore. Relief flashed across Kalen's face, quickly controlled. My garrison is 2 days' ride. I have soldiers I trust there, including my second Kieran Stormwright. We'll plan from there. And what am I beta witness to lock away for safekeeping? He met her eyes. Something fierce moved in his expression. A partner, if you'll agree. Your ability, if you can learn to control it, makes you the most strategic asset I have. He hesitated, then pushed forward. And I don't want to lock you away. First acknowledgement of what was between them, not just the mate bond, but the connection they'd been building over 2 days of forced proximity and shared trauma. So we're doing this, Thessaly said, hunting your best friend who's hunting me. Yes. And we're mates who've been sharing a bed while you've had control issues. His ears went red again, that endearing flush she was starting to enjoy provoking. Must you? She stepped closer into his space, watching his pupils dilate. For the record, I think your problem is sweet. Proves you're not the Ice King everyone thinks you are. His voice dropped, going rough. I'm not sweet. No, she agreed, noticing how his eyes had darkened, how his hands had flexed at his sides like he was restraining himself from reaching for her. You're really not. The moment stretched, charged with possibility. She could feel the mate bond pulling, demanding, insisting they close this distance and claim what was theirs. His scent wrapped around her cedar and smoke and want. Then she stepped back, breaking the spell. Let's go catch a traitor. The storm finally broke the next morning. They prepared to leave in charged silence, both hyper-aware of what had almost happened, what was building between them with every passing hour. Before they descended to the common room, Kalen caught her hand. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For trusting me, for being brave enough to do this. He squeezed her fingers. We'll stop him. Together. Together, she agreed. And somehow standing in that inn room where they'd shared nightmares and revelations, where pillow barriers had become promises, Thessaly believed it. They walked down the stairs, side by side, the Alpha King and the Echo, heading toward danger and betrayal and a reckoning 20 years in the making. The road from Crossroads Inn wound through mountains that looked like they'd been carved from ice and shadow. Thessaly rode beside the Alpha King, and every mile that passed felt like stepping deeper into a story she couldn't control, but had chosen to live anyway. 2 days to the garrison, 2 days to plan, 2 days before they walked into the den of a man who'd slaughtered her entire pack and called it duty. The horses picked their way carefully through snow that sparkled like crushed diamonds in the morning light. Kalen rode with the easy confidence of someone who'd been born in a saddle. He'd procured a horse for her from the inn's stable, a good one, probably far better than she could have afforded on her own. The journey ahead stretched before them like a promise, a threat, a beginning written in winter light and wolf's breath. But for the first time in 3 weeks, Thessaly wasn't walking alone. They crested a ridge as the sun climbed higher. The valley spread below them, pristine and beautiful. And in the distance, barely visible through the clear mountain air, a column of dark smoke rose against the pale sky. Too much smoke. Too black. Kalen went rigid in his saddle, his head lifted like a wolf scenting prey. That's near Crestwood Village, he said. His voice had gone flat. Dangerous. 3 miles from this garrison. The smoke thickened even as they watched. Not cook fires, not controlled burning. Something was very wrong. Thessaly's wolf stirred uneasily. The mate bond hummed with Kalen's sudden tension. "We ride," he said. "Fast." And they did. The smell hit them first. Burning wood, burning flesh, the acrid stench of destruction that Thessaly knew too well. It wrapped around her senses and squeezed, dragging her back to the cellar, to the night her world had burned, while she hid like a coward. Not again. Not now. They rode hard, pushing the horses faster than was safe on uncertain terrain. The smoke grew thicker, the smell stronger, and then they crested the final ridge and saw it. Crestwood Village was burning. Buildings blazed like torches. People screamed, running through streets, while armed raiders cut them down or dragged them toward the tree line. Thessaly counted at least 15 attackers, organized and efficient, moving through the chaos with military precision. This wasn't random violence. This was systematic slaughter. Down. Kalen's alpha command cracked out like thunder, amplified by fury and desperation. Every raider dropped to their knees as if strings had been cut. The sheer force of it rolled over the village, immobilizing attackers mid-strike. Several villagers collapsed, too caught in the edges of the command, but they were alive. That was what mattered. Soldiers in garrison uniforms swarmed from the forest. They'd been tracking the raiders, arrived just behind Kalen. But they were too late for many. Bodies littered the streets. A woman lay crumpled in a doorway. A man sprawled across a cart he'd tried to defend. The living wept over the dead. A soldier approached, broad-shouldered, with kind eyes and a lieutenant's insignia. "My lord," he saw Kalen and immediately saluted. "We've been pursuing them since dawn. They hit 3 villages in 2 days. Casualties? 23 dead, 14 wounded." The lieutenant's jaw tightened. "Could have been worse if you hadn't arrived." "Still too many." Kalen dismounted, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Secure the raiders. I want one alive for questioning." Thessaly slid from her horse, her eyes already scanning the burning buildings, looking for survivors, looking for a child's scream cut through the K, high and terrified. She didn't think, just moved. The house blazed like a bonfire. Heat pressed against her face like a physical wall. Smoke choked the air, made her eyes stream. But she heard it again, that scream, coming from inside. She dropped low where the air was clearer and pushed deeper into the burning building. The heat seared her lungs. Flames licked at the walls, climbing toward the ceiling. Wood groaned overhead, ready to collapse. 3 children huddled in the corner. 2 girls, maybe 6 and 8. A boy, no more than 4. The ceiling groaned above them, fire eating through support beams. "Come on!" Thessaly grabbed the 2 girls, one under each arm. "Follow me!" she yelled at the boy. He ran after her. They burst into the street, coughing and crying. She shoved the girls at a soldier, turned back. The boy was still inside. He'd frozen in terror, standing in the middle of the room while flames climbed the walls. The beam above him cracked with a sound like breaking bones. Thessaly ran back in, grabbed him, ran for the door. The beam fell. Kalen appeared from nowhere. His hands caught the burning wood, his face contorted with agony, but he held it, muscles straining, while she got the boy clear. Then he dropped it and followed, his hands blistered and raw skin peeling where he'd gripped the burning beam. Outside, chaos was resolving into order. The lieutenant, she heard someone call him Kieran, was organizing survivors, getting the wounded to safety. Soldiers had the raiders contained. Thessaly's hands shook as she checked the children. Smoke inhalation. Minor burns. But alive. All 3 alive. "You could have died," Kalen's voice beside her, rough with emotion. She looked up at his ruined hands. Anger and gratitude warred in her chest. "So could you. You caught a burning beam." "There were children." "I know." His undamaged hand cupped her face, thumb brushing away soot. "Thank you." The moment broke when Kieran approached. "My lord, we have casualties, but 1 raider is still alive, conscious, ready for questioning." "Good." Kalen's expression went hard. "I have questions." The raider was bound and bleeding, propped against a wagon under guard. Bitter hatred twisted his features when he saw Kalen. His eyes held the fanaticism of a true believer. "We're cleansing the bloodlines," he spat before anyone could ask. "Lord Ashenmore's orders. The Echoes can't be allowed to organize." Thessaly's blood ran cold. Kalen's alpha command threaded through his next words, making resistance impossible. "What do you know about Echoes?" The words came out mechanical. "Compelled. Abominations. Power that doesn't belong to one wolf. They'll overthrow the natural order. Lord Ashenmore says they're too dangerous to live, that they'll tip the balance, make alphas obsolete. What else? We have 8 more. Northern Mountains, Lord Ashenmore's compound. Alive. The raider's eyes found Thessaly and something like recognition flickered. You're the Silver Pine Echo. You're supposed to be dead. Her stomach dropped. They knew about me specifically. There's a bounty, the raider continued, a smile spreading through bloody teeth. 1,000 gold pieces, alive or dead. You're the prize, the one who got away. Kalen's alpha presence flared pure threat that made even Thessaly's knees weak. Who else are you targeting? And already captured 8. Lord Ashenmore's holding them. Insurance, leverage, proof that echoes need to be controlled or eliminated. The compulsion dragged more from him. Some of them have been there for weeks, months. But 8 more like her. 8 people who'd been hunted, captured, imprisoned. Because of what they could do, what they were. Where exactly is this compound? The raider gave coordinates, detailed directions, everything. Then Kalen signaled the guards. Lock him up. He'll stand trial with the others. Thessaly treated Kalen's hands while Kieran organized a war council. Her healer training came back easily, even though her own hands shook with adrenaline and horror. Cool water, clean cloths, honey to prevent infection, careful bandaging. You should have let me go in alone, she said, focusing on the wrapping so she didn't have to meet his eyes. Never. Your hands will heal. Those children wouldn't have. She looked up then, saw him watching her with something fierce and protective and terrifying in its intensity. You can't keep throwing yourself in front of danger for me. Watch me. The war council gathered in what remained of Crestwood's meeting hall. Kieran spread maps across a singed table. Other soldiers crowded in, veterans with hard eyes and scarred faces. Men and women who'd seen too much death. The compound is here, Kieran marked the location. Built into the mountainside, heavily fortified. We estimate 20 guards plus Ashenmore himself. Unknown number of prisoners. We move at dawn. Kalen's voice held absolute authority. Fast assault, overwhelming force. Get those echoes out before he can execute them. What about me? Thessaly asked. Every head turned. You heard the raider. I'm specifically targeted. Corvus knows I'm alive. Knows I'm with you. Hiding me won't help. Kalen's jaw tightened. You stay here, under guard. Absolutely not. You heard him. You're the prize. He'll try to take you. Which means he knows I exist. Pretending otherwise is stupid. She planted her hands on the table, leaned forward, met his eyes across the scarred wood. I'm not your subject. I'm your mate. And you said we were partners. Stalemate. She watched him war with himself, saw every protective instinct screaming at him to refuse, saw him weigh her safety against the tactical advantage of having an echo who could amplify abilities, against the simple fact that she was right, hiding her changed nothing. Kieran glanced between them with carefully neutral expression. She has a point, my lord. If she can amplify your alpha command, she could be the difference between victory and massacre. She could also be killed. I'm aware of the risks, Thessaly said. I choose to take them. Another long moment of silence. Then Kalen exhaled slowly. Together, but you follow my lead in combat. Fine, as long as you stop treating me like glass. I make no promises. They were given a room at the garrison, one bed, because apparently the universe had a sense of humor. Tomorrow they'd ride for the compound, for battle and possible death. Tonight was all they had. Thessaly sat on the bed, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline crash hit hard, making her hands shake, making the horror of the day settle into her bones. 23 dead, children screaming, Kalen's hands burning. I'm sorry, he said quietly from where he stood by the window, for trying to sideline you. You're protective, I get it. It's more than that. He turned to face her. I've lost too many people, my parents, my mentor, good soldiers under my command. The thought of losing you, his voice cracked. I don't think I'd survive it. She crossed to him, took his bandaged hands gently between hers. Then let's make sure neither of us dies tomorrow. They stood close enough that she could feel his breath, could see his pupils dilate. His eyes dropped to her mouth, lingered there. You could kiss me, she whispered, if you wanted. If I start, I won't want to stop. So don't. He kissed her finally, desperately, like a man dying of thirst finding water. It wasn't gentle or careful. It was 3 days of tension and fear and desire catching flame, his hands buried in her hair, pulling her closer. Hers gripped his shoulders, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a tilting world. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she felt the mate bond singing between them. Not completed yet, but close. So close. We should sleep, he said, voice wrecked. Tomorrow. I know. They lay down together. Her back to his chest, his arm around her waist. Safe for tonight. Tomorrow they'd face death and danger. But tonight they had this. Kalen. Thank you for catching that beam. His arm tightened. Thank you for running into a burning building. Even though it took 10 years off my life. She smiled into the darkness. We're quite a pair. We are. She felt him press a kiss to her hair, felt the bond humming warm and constant between them. Tomorrow would bring war. Tonight they had peace, and somehow that was enough. Dawn came too soon and too cold. 40 soldiers assembled in the garrison courtyard, checking weapons and armor with the efficiency of men and women who'd done this countless times. Thessaly stood beside her horse, watching Kalen move through the ranks. He checked equipment, spoke quietly to individuals. His presence steadied nervous soldiers, calmed anxious wolves. This was the Alpha King, not the man who blushed when she teased him, but the leader who'd held a kingdom together since he was 13. He caught her staring as he swung into his saddle. What, nothing? Just you're good at this. A slight smile touched his mouth. I've had practice. But she saw the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. Today he'd confront his childhood friend. Today he'd face betrayal that cut to his core. Kieran rode up beside them. Scouts report the compound is quiet. No unusual activity. Too quiet, Kalen said. He knows we're coming. They rode hard for 3 hours, climbing into the northern mountains where the air grew thin and cold. The landscape turned harsh, unforgiving, perfect for hiding war crimes. The compound appeared as they crested a ridge, built into the mountainside itself, stone walls rising from natural rock, narrow windows, a single reinforced gate, defensive, isolated, designed to withstand siege. 20 guards, Kieran reported, reading scout signals, plus Ashenmore. The compound has internal chambers carved into the mountain. Once those gates close, it's nearly impregnable. Then we don't let them close. Kalen looked at Thessaly. His face was a careful mask, but she felt his fear through the bond. Are you certain about this? Use me as bait. I walk up to the front gate. Corvus will bring me in personally. I'm the prize, remember. You follow once I'm inside. And if something goes wrong, his hands tightened on the reins. If he hurts you before we can breach, then you come in and rip the doors off. She tried to smile, but we need to get inside. This is how. She watched him struggle with it, saw every protective instinct screaming at him to refuse, saw him weigh her safety against 8 lives trapped inside, against stopping Corvus before more packs died. Fine, he said finally, the word coming out strangled. But I'm giving you a direct link through the mate bond. If I focus, I can sense you, feel your emotions, your location. She felt it as he opened himself to her, a tether snapping into place between them, warm and solid. Through it flowed his fear for her, his determination, his love carefully controlled but undeniable. If you're in danger, he said, gray eyes boring into hers, I'll know and I'll come for you. I know you will. He pulled her close, pressed his forehead to hers. Be smart, be safe. And if he tries anything, despite everything, he smiled, scream loud enough for me to hear in the next kingdom. Then he kissed her, hard and brief and desperate, and let her go. Thessaly walked toward the compound alone. Her hands were empty, visibly unarmed, but her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Behind her, hidden in the rocks, Kalen and 40 soldiers waited, watching, ready. The gate loomed ahead. Guards were visible on the walls, tracking her approach. She stopped 50 feet out, drew a breath, and called out in a voice that carried, Tell Corvus Ashenmore that the Silver Pine Echo is here to negotiate. Confusion rippled through the guards. One disappeared inside. 5 minutes crawled by while she stood exposed, feeling Kalen's tension through the bond like a second heartbeat. Then the gates opened. Corvus Ashenmore stepped out. Seeing him in person made her stomach turn. Exactly like her sketch. Sharp features, cold eyes that held no warmth. That tattoo stark on his wrist. But worse was the smile. Cruel and pleased, like she'd just confirmed something he'd hoped for. Well, he said, voice cultured and cold. The survivor herself. I thought you'd run farther. Thessaly forced her voice steady, sent impressions through the bond to Kalen. Gate open, Corvus present, 20 guards visible. I'm done running. You want echoes? Here I am. Let the others go. Why would I do that? Because I'm the one you really want. The Silver Pine bloodline, the strongest echo in 3 generations. She had no idea if this was true, was gambling everything on the bluff. Corvus studied her head tilted like a predator examining prey. Then he laughed, genuinely amused. You're braver than I expected. Or stupider. He gestured. Come inside, let's talk. The compound was dark, cold, built for function over comfort. Corvus led her through corridors lit by torches, guards at every intersection watching with flat, dead eyes. She tried to memorize the layout, sent impressions through the bond. Left turn, stairs down, iron-reinforced doors. You're wondering why Corvus said conversationally as if they were discussing weather. Why kill your pack? Why hunt echoes? The thought crossed my mind. He stopped at a window overlooking the mountains. My sister was an echo, Meredith. Beautiful, powerful, and completely unstable. His voice was empty, matter-of-fact, more terrifying than rage would have been. The power drove her mad. She'd amplify emotions. Joy became mania. Sadness became suicidal depression. One night she lost control, killed our parents in their sleep because their worry about her felt like suffocation. I'm sorry, Thessaly said. Meant it. I had to put her down myself. He continued like she hadn't spoken. Held her while she died, while she begged me to forgive her. And I decided then the world is safer without power that can't be controlled. Alphas can be trained, disciplined, shaped into weapons that serve. Echoes are wild cards, dangerous. We're not weapons. You're exactly weapons. He turned to face her. And weapons should be destroyed before they're turned against us. He opened a door, gestured her through. Stone stairs led down into darkness, her heart hammered. The bond with Kaelin sang with tension. Hold on, she thought at him. Just hold on. At the bottom of the stairs was a cell, large, carved from mountain stone. Iron door, narrow window, and inside 8 people. Emaciated, hollow-eyed, chained to the walls, all young, early 20s at most. They looked up when the door opened. Hope and despair warred on their faces. My collection, Corvus said. You'll be the 9th. I was going to execute you all tomorrow. But, he smiled, having the Alpha King's mate might be more useful. Leverage. She whirled. He doesn't know, please. Corvus's smile widened. I've known Kaelin since we were children. I recognize obsession. The moment he marked you, you became important. Valuable. He shoved her toward the cell. And now you're mine. The iron door slammed. Keys turned. Corvus's footsteps receded up the stairs. Thessaly stood frozen for 3 heartbeats, then went immediately to the nearest prisoner. A young woman, maybe 19, with matted blonde hair. I'm Thessaly. Help is coming. I promise. You shouldn't promise that. The girl's voice was rough from disuse. No one's coming. No one even knows we're here. They know, Thessaly looked at the others. 7 more faces marked by captivity and pain. Trust me. Through the bond, she felt Kaelin's rage building like a storm, felt the exact moment the cell door closed on her, felt his alpha presence expanding, filling him with power that demanded release. Any second now. Any second above them, the world exploded. Kaelin's command detonated like thunder. The mountain itself seemed to shake. Thessaly felt it through the bond, pure focused fury translated into power that couldn't be denied. Break the gates. The prisoners looked up, hope flickering to life in dead eyes. Thessaly smiled. I told you. Help is coming. The battle raged above. Thessaly heard it through the stone. Shouts, steel clashing, the roar of wolves. And underneath it all, Kaelin's presence burning like a star coming for her. The 8 echoes watched her with varying degrees of hope and suspicion. She introduced herself properly. Learned their names. Elowyn Hayes, 19, Riverbend Pack, timid but with steel underneath. Cassian Cross, 22, sharp tongue and sharper intelligence. 10 out of 10 rescue attempt. Would recommend. Thaddeus Bennett, 24, protective presence even in chains. Thank you for not giving up on us. Isolde Hale, 18, artist's hands and haunted eyes. She reminded Thessaly painfully of herself. Evander Carlyle, 21, gentle voice. I was studying to be a teacher before. Briar Nash, 20, fierce even in weakness. When do we get out of here? When do we fight back? Soren Monroe, 23, quiet and observant. You're the one who testified, the Silver Pine survivor. Ren Green, 22, leaders bearing despite everything. What happens to us now? Now, Thessaly said, we wait for the Alpha King to tear this place apart. And then we help you build a life where you're never hunted again. Footsteps on the stairs, heavy, urgent. The door exploded inward. Kieran stood in the opening, soldiers behind him, looking like avenging angels. Are you hurt? He asked Thessaly. No, but they are. She gestured to the 8. Get them out. Where's Kalen? Fighting Corvus in the courtyard. We need to move. Now. Thessaly ran, up the stairs, through corridors now littered with unconscious guards, into the courtyard where Kalen and Corvus circled each other like wolves. Both alpha strong, both trained by the same masters, both carrying decades of friendship turned to betrayal. Steel rang against steel, power against power. Corvus fought with doctrine, with cold calculation. Kalen fought for love, for justice, for 8 people in chains and the woman who'd become his entire world. But they were too evenly matched. Then Corvus moved with desperate speed, got behind Kalen, knife to his throat. Always so noble, Corvus hissed, always so controlled. Let's see that control when I open your throat. Thessaly didn't think, didn't plan. She reached for her echo ability, not to amplify, but to weaponize. She dove into Corvus's mind through the swirling emotions of the courtyard, found his guilt buried under righteous fury, and pulled Meredith's face, laughing before the madness took her, singing while she gardened, the way she'd braided flowers in her hair, Meredith dying by his hand, begging forgiveness, going still in his arms. The guilt, the crushing, suffocating guilt he'd transmuted into zealotry to survive. Corvus screamed, the knife faltered. Kalen moved, disarmed, struck, slammed him face first into the stone. It was over in seconds. Thessaly swayed, the courtyard tilted. Power exhaustion crashed over her in waves. Too much. She'd used too much. Kalen caught her before she hit the ground. I've got you. Used too much, she mumbled. Feels like my brain's leaking out my ears. Despite everything the battle, the blood Corvus in chains raving about cleansing bloodlines, Kalen laughed. Let's get you home. Around them, the 8 echoes were brought out, blinking in sunlight they hadn't seen in weeks. Healers rushed forward. Soldiers secured the compound. Evidence would be found, maps, lists of targets, correspondence with others who shared Corvus's vision. The conspiracy went deeper than one man's grief. But today they'd won. Thessaly felt consciousness slipping. But she managed one more smile. We did it. Together, Kalen murmured against her hair. She passed out in his arms, feeling safe even as the world went dark, because he'd come for her, just like he promised. And that was everything. Thessaly woke to softness, silk sheets, down pillows, warmth that had nothing to do with blankets. The room was unfamiliar, large and elegantly appointed with tall windows, letting in afternoon light. Not the garrison, somewhere else. Her eyes found Kalen slumped in a chair beside the bed, still wearing his travel clothes stained with blood and ash. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He looked exhausted, his guard finally completely down. She watched him for a moment. This man who'd caught burning beams and stormed compounds and dropped to his knees beside her bed like he was praying. Her awkward, beautiful king. She reached out, touched his hand where it rested on the bed. He jolted awake. His eyes snapped open and immediately focused on her face. Relief crashed over his features like a wave transforming exhaustion into something radiant. Thessaly. Her name came out broken. Grateful. He gripped her hand like she might disappear. You terrified me. How long? Her voice came out rough, unused. 2 days. You used too much power. The healer said your mind needed time to recover from the strain. 2 days. She'd been unconscious for 2 days while he sat vigil. She could see it in the lines of his face, the way his clothes were rumpled. He'd barely left her side. We got them out, she said, the echoes. All 8, they're recovering, safe, being housed in the palace until they decide what they want to do next. His thumb stroked across her knuckles. You saved them. We saved them. You almost died doing it. She squeezed his hand, felt the bond between them humming warm and constant. But I didn't. We're both still here. He leaned forward, pressed his forehead to hers. Just breathed for a moment. She felt his fear through the bond, the terror that had gripped him when she'd collapsed, the helplessness of watching her lie unconscious for 2 days. Don't do that again, he whispered. No promises. You caught a burning beam, remember? Despite everything, he smiled. Fair point. The palace was nothing like she'd expected. Thessaly had imagined cold stone and intimidating grandeur. Instead, Kalen's private quarters held warmth. Books lined the walls. A desk covered in documents sat by the window. Weapons hung on racks, functional, not decorative. The space felt lived in, real. This is yours, she asked, running her fingers along a bookshelf. Has been for 20 years. He watched her explore with that soft expression he reserved for moments like these. I was crowned at 13. The generals wanted me in the formal royal apartments. I insisted on these rooms instead. They're smaller, more defendable, and they were far enough from the throne room that I could breathe. She pulled a book at random, poetry. The spine was cracked from repeated reading. You read poetry. His ears went red. That endearing flush she'd started to love. My mother used to read it to me. After she died, it was the only thing that felt like her. Thessaly replaced the book carefully. Crossed to where he stood by the window. Show me your hands. He held them out. The burns were healing, pink new skin visible where blisters had been. They'd scar, permanent reminders of burning beams and desperate rescues. Worth it, he said, reading her expression. Every mark, every scar. To know you're safe. You can't keep throwing yourself in front of danger for me. I believe we've had this conversation. His mouth quirked, and I believe I said, watch me. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could take care of herself, but the simple truth was having someone who cared enough to catch burning beams felt like a gift she'd stopped believing in. Thank you, she said instead. He pulled her close. No hesitation, no careful distance, just his arms around her and his chin resting on top of her head. They stood like that while afternoon light painted the room gold and the palace hummed with life around them. For the first time in 3 weeks, maybe the first time since the massacre, Thessaly felt safe. 3 days after waking, Thessaly was strong enough to visit the 8 echoes. They were housed in the palace's east wing, 8 rooms surrounding a common area with windows overlooking gardens that looked like they'd been painted by an artist. Sunlight streamed through glass, plants bloomed in corners. Someone had made this space deliberately welcoming. When Thessaly entered, all 8 looked up. Hope, weariness, gratitude, trauma barely contained. Hi, she said, suddenly uncertain. I'm Thessaly. I know we met in the cell, but that wasn't really. I wanted to properly introduce myself. Elowen stood first. The blonde girl who'd been so timid in the cell now carried herself with tentative strength. I'm Elowen Hayes, 19. From River Bend Pack. Was from, I guess. She paused. Thank you for coming for us. One by one, they introduced themselves properly. Cassian Cross, 22. Sharp wit that hid deep wounds. Nice prison break. Would absolutely get rescued again. 5 stars. Thaddeus Bennett, 24. Broad-shouldered and protective despite obvious malnourishment. You didn't give up, even when it would have been easier. That means everything. Isolde Hale, 18. Artist hands that trembled slightly. She reminded Thessaly so much of herself it hurt to look at her. Evander Carlyle, 21. Gentle eyes and a teacher's patient voice. I was studying before they took me. I'd like to study again, if that's possible. Briar Nash, 20. Fierce even in recovery. When do we start training? When do we learn to make sure this never happens again? Soren Monroe, 23. Quiet and observant, watching everything with careful intelligence. You testified against Ashenmore. You're the one who saw. Ren Green, Borgamine, 22. Natural leader despite everything. What happens to us now? Thessaly looked at them. 8 people who'd survived the impossible. 8 lives that had been broken and might with time and care be rebuilt. What do you want to happen? She asked. The question seemed to surprise them, as if no one had asked what they wanted in a very long time. I want to make sure this never happens again, Briar said immediately. I want to learn to use this power. Weaponize it if I have to. No more hiding. Ren nodded. We should learn control together. Safety in numbers. Strength and understanding. We need each other. We need a sanctuary, Thaddeus added. Somewhere echoes can be trained, protected. Where we're not treated like weapons or abominations, but like people with abilities that need guidance. Thessaly felt Kalen's presence before she heard him, turned to find him standing in the doorway. Several of the echoes tensed. He noticed, stopped, kept his voice gentle. We can do anything we decide to, he said. This is a new world now. You're not prisoners or weapons. You're citizens with rights and protection under my rule. He stepped forward slowly, non-threatening. And if you want a place to learn to heal, to become whatever you choose to be, we'll build it. 2 months passed in a blur of reconstruction and tentative hope. Thessaly spent her days in the training yard with the 8 echoes, teaching them control through methods she was inventing as she went, how to sense others' emotions without being overwhelmed, how to amplify deliberately instead of accidentally, how to protect their minds from the constant barrage of feelings around them. Elowen proved naturally talented. Her timidity masked fierce determination. She could amplify healing abilities, made a court physician's minor talent bloom into something extraordinary. Cassian used humor to deflect trauma, but worked harder than anyone. His gift amplified speed, made fast wolves into blurs of motion. Thaddeus became the group's anchor, protective, steady. His ability amplified defensive instincts, turned good fighters into impenetrable shields. Isolde painted again, translated echo experiences into art that made Thessaly want to cry. Beauty drawn from pain. Evander's gentleness hid strength. He amplified teaching abilities, made complex concepts suddenly clear. Briar fought like she had something to prove. Her gift amplified aggression, dangerous but powerful when controlled. Soren watched everything with careful eyes. His ability was subtler. He amplified observation, let people see details they'd otherwise miss. Ren led naturally. Her gift amplified leadership presence, made good commanders into legends. Together, they were formidable. Together, they were family. Kaelin implemented reforms while Thessaly trained. 3 council members were stripped of their positions: Lord Shaw, Lord Hawthorne, Lady Blackwell, all implicated in Corvus's conspiracy through financial records found at the compound, all awaiting trial for treason. New council seats opened. Echo representatives given advisory positions. Laws passed protecting those with unusual abilities from discrimination or exploitation. The kingdom watched. Some approved. Others grumbled about change happening too fast. But no one openly challenged the Alpha King. In the evenings, Kaelin and Thessaly walked the palace gardens, talked about everything and nothing. He told her about the burden of ruling, the weight of every decision. She told him about the Echo's progress, their setbacks and victories. They stole kisses in corridors, held hands under council tables, fell asleep tangled together more nights than not, learning each other in ways that had nothing to do with the mate bond and everything to do with choice. He was learning to share power, to trust her as an equal partner. She was learning to accept help, to believe she deserved good things. And slowly the palace that had felt like a monument to duty became something like home. The formal council session was called 2 months to the day after the compound assault. Thessaly sat beside Kaelin at the head table. No longer a guest, a recognized presence in kingdom politics. She wore clothes provided by the palace seamstress, deep blue that brought out the gray in her eyes. Simple but elegant. Kaelin presented the evidence methodically. Documents from Corvus's compound, testimony from captured raiders, financial records showing 3 lords had funded the Echo Purge. The proof was damning, incontrovertible. Lord Shaw, Lord Hawthorne, and Lady Blackwell are hereby stripped of their titles and lands, Kaelin announced, their assets seized to provide reparations for the families affected by their conspiracy. They await trial for treason and murder. The council murmured but didn't object. The evidence spoke for itself. Furthermore, Kaelin continued, I'm formally recognizing Echoes as citizens with full rights under kingdom law. Discrimination, exploitation, or violence against Echoes will be prosecuted as high crimes. More murmurs. But Thessaly noticed several council members nodding. Change was happening. Slowly, but happening. And finally, Kaelin said, looking directly at her, I'm establishing the Echo Academy, a place for those with this gift to learn control and safety, to understand their abilities and choose their own paths. He paused. Headmistress Thessaly Ravenscar will oversee its operations. She stared at him. We talked about this. His eyes held hers. We talked about partnership, leading together. This is your expertise. I'm simply making it official. Unless you'd prefer a different title, he added aloud. The council was watching, waiting. She saw approval on some faces, calculation on others, genuine hope on the Echo representatives. Headmistress Ravenscar, she said slowly, letting the title settle, has a ring to it. Applause rippled through the chamber. Not universal, not perfect, but progress. That evening, a visitor came to Thessaly's door. Celine Thornhart, 28, highborn, beautiful in the way expensive things are beautiful, polished and perfect and somehow cold. She wore a dress that cost more than Thessaly had earned in a year of healing work. Miss Ravenscar, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, I wanted to congratulate you on your appointment. Thank you, Thessaly kept her voice neutral. Something about this woman set her teeth on edge. It's quite remarkable, really. Rising from rogue to headmistress in 2 months. Some might say unprecedented. Celine's tone stayed pleasant, but her words had edges. Though I suppose having the Alpha King's favor helps. There it was, the implication that Thessaly hadn't earned her position, that she was decoration, a pet project. I survived a massacre, Thessaly said quietly. Lived 3 weeks as a rogue. Saved 8 people from a madman's compound. I think I've earned more than favor. Of course. I didn't mean to imply, Celine's smile sharpened. It's just that some of us have been preparing our whole lives for positions of influence. And then someone appears from nowhere and is handed power. It can seem unfair. Life's unfair, Thessaly agreed. I watched my family burn. Fair doesn't enter into it. Celine's mask slipped for just a moment. Something ugly flickered in her eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by that perfect smile. Well, I simply wanted to welcome you to court life. It can be quite complex. So many unspoken rules. So many ways to make enemies without meaning to. She paused at the door. Do let me know if you need guidance navigating these waters. I'd hate to see you drown. Then she was gone. Thessaly stood in the empty hallway, her wolf bristling with instinctive dislike. That hadn't been a welcome. That had been a warning. She told Kalen about it that night. They were in his quarters, their quarters now, though she still thought of them as his. She'd moved in gradually over the past 2 months. A few clothes in the wardrobe, her sketchbook on the desk, her scent mixing with his until the space smelled like both of them. Celine Thornhart, he said thoughtfully. Highborn family, wealthy, connected. He pulled Thessaly closer on the couch where they sat. She's been angling for a council position for years. Your appointment probably stung. She basically said I didn't earn it. You earned it by surviving what would have killed most people, by saving 8 lives, by having the courage to weaponize your own trauma to stop a killer. His hand found hers. Celine's jealous. That makes her petty, not right. Should I be worried about her? No, I'll make it clear you're under my protection. She won't dare make a move. But something in his voice suggested he wasn't entirely certain. The incident came 3 weeks later. Thessaly was in the training yard with the Echoes when Celine appeared, watching from the colonnade with several other highborn ladies. Their expressions ranged from curious to disdainful. Thessaly tried to ignore them, focused on the exercise. Eloan was practicing amplifying Isolde's artistic vision, making her see colors and shapes no one else could perceive. Fascinating, Celine's voice carried across the yard, loud enough to be heard. Training them like pets. I suppose next you'll teach them tricks. Several of the Echoes flinched. Isolde's concentration shattered. The color she'd been painting in the air dissolved. Thessaly turned slowly. They're not pets, they're students. Of course, students. Celine descended the steps with liquid grace, though one does wonder about the wisdom of teaching such dangerous abilities. What if one loses control? What if the madness takes them, like it took Ashen Moore's sister? The words were calculated, designed to wound, to plant doubt. We're learning control precisely so that doesn't happen, Thessaly said evenly. Are you? Because from what I hear, you've never been formally trained yourself. You're inventing methods as you go, experimenting on these poor souls. Celine's smile was poison sweet. What happens when your experiment fails? Briar stepped forward, anger flashing in her eyes. Thaddeus put a hand on her shoulder, held her back. The experiment, Thessaly said quietly, has already succeeded. 8 people who were prisoners are now free, learning, growing, becoming more than what was done to them. For now, but power corrupts. Everyone knows that. Give them too much freedom, too much ability, and they'll turn on you. It's only a matter of time. Is that a threat? A warning from someone who understands court politics better than a former rogue. Celine's mask dropped completely. You don't belong here, Thessaly Ravenscar. You're a charity case the king took pity on, and charity cases eventually wear out their welcome. That's enough. Kalen's voice cut across the yard like a blade. He stood in the doorway, radiating alpha presence. Not the overwhelming force he'd used in battle, but enough to make Celine's ladies step back. Enough to make Celine herself go pale. She is not a charity case, he said, voice deadly quiet. She is my mate, my equal, the woman I trust with the future of this kingdom. He descended the steps, moved to stand beside Thessaly, and she is under my protection. Challenge her, you challenge me. The yard went silent. Even the Echoes held their breath. Celine's face went white, then red. My lord, I was simply leaving now. And if I hear you've spoken to or about Headmistress Ravenscar with anything less than respect, you'll find yourself stripped of your family's court privileges. Am I clear? Crystal. The word came out strangled. Celine left with her ladies trailing behind. But the look she shot Thessaly over her shoulder held pure hatred. When they were gone, Kalen turned to Thessaly. Are you all right? Fine, but you didn't have to. Yes, I did. His hand found hers, squeezed. I meant what I said. You're not a charity case. You're the strongest person I know. Around them, the 8 echoes stood watching, seeing their headmistress defended, seeing power used to protect instead of harm. Elwyn smiled, small but genuine. And Thessaly realized this was what the academy would be. A place where strength protected vulnerability instead of exploiting it, where power served instead of dominated. All right, she said, turning back to her students. From the top. Elwyn is old, let's try again. A week later, the council demanded proof. Proof that echoes could be controlled. That they wouldn't become like Corvus's sister. That investing resources in the academy wasn't a waste or a danger. Kaelin told Thessaly about it in their quarters after a long day of political maneuvering. They want a demonstration, he said, frustration evident in every line of his body. Public, before the full council. What kind of demonstration? Your students, showing their abilities, proving they're in control. Thessaly's stomach sank. You're asking me to parade them like performing animals. I'm asking you to show the council what you've built, to prove that echoes can be trained, that they're not dangers to be eliminated, but assets to be valued. And if something goes wrong, if someone loses control, then we deal with it together. He crossed to her, took her hands. I believe in you, in them. But the council needs to see it to believe it. She wanted to refuse, wanted to protect her students from being judged by people who didn't understand. But she saw the political reality, saw that this demonstration might be the difference between the academy thriving or being shut down before it truly began. All right, she said, we'll show them. The demonstration took place in the palace's grand hall. Every council member attended, nobles, military leaders, representatives from major pacts. The gallery was packed with people who'd come to watch echoes prove themselves or fail spectacularly. Thessaly stood with her 8 students, all of them nervous, all of them determined. Remember, she told them quietly, this isn't about impressing them. It's about showing them the truth, that you're people with gifts, not monsters with curses. Isolde went first. She stood in the center of the hall with canvas and paints. As she worked, Elwyn amplified her artistic vision. Colors bloomed on the canvas, impossible shades that shouldn't exist but somehow did. The painting that emerged in 15 minutes was breathtaking. A sunrise over mountains rendered in hues that made people gasp. Beauty, pure and undeniable. Evander demonstrated next. He taught a complex mathematical principle to a volunteer from the audience. Ren amplified his teaching gift. What should have taken hours to understand clicked into place in minutes. The volunteer's face lit up with comprehension. Knowledge, freely given. Briar and Cassian sparred. Thaddeus amplified Briar's defensive instincts, while Cassian amplified speed. The result was a demonstration of controlled power, fierce but precise, dangerous but disciplined, strength, harnessed and directed. The council watched. Some faces showed approval, others remained skeptical. But no one could deny what they were seeing. Then Soren stepped forward. I can amplify observation, he said, his voice carried despite his quiet nature. Let people see details they'd otherwise miss. Like Lee's. He looked directly at one of the council members. Lord Brennan, elderly, respected, supposedly neutral in the Echo debate. You've been taking bribes from the Thornhart family, Soren said, to vote against Echo rights. The payments are recorded in a ledger you keep hidden in your estate's library. Third shelf from the left, behind a copy of Military Histories of the Northern Campaign. The hall erupted. Lord Brennan's face went purple. He stammered denials, but Soren's words had the ring of truth. Kaelin's alpha command cut through the chaos. Silence. Everyone froze. Lord Brennan, Kaelin said, voice deadly calm. Is this true? That boy is lying. He couldn't possibly. Soren, Thessaly said. Can you see anything else? Soren closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were distant, focused inward. The Thornhart family wants the academy shut down. They've been funding opposition, bribing council members, spreading rumors that echoes are dangerous. He looked at Kaelin. They see us as threats to their power. The implications crashed through the hall like thunder. Kaelin's face went hard. Guards, escort Lord Brennan to the dungeons pending investigation, and send soldiers to the Thornhart estate. I want that ledger found. As guards dragged the protesting lord away, Kaelin addressed the council. This is what echoes can do. See truth where others see only surface. Find corruption where others see only respectability. He gestured to the 8 students. They're not weapons, not monsters. They're the future. And anyone who tries to eliminate that future will answer to me. The council session ended in chaos, but the message was clear. The academy would stand. That night, Kaelin found Thessaly on the private balcony outside their quarters. She stood at the railing watching the stars wheel overhead, processing everything that had happened. The demonstration, Soren's revelation, the realization that they had enemies she hadn't even known existed. "You're thinking too loud," Kaelin said, coming to stand beside her. "I'm thinking that this is more complicated than I realized. That building the academy isn't just about teaching control. It's about navigating politics and enemies and people who want us to fail. Yes, welcome to leadership." He leaned against the railing, shoulder to shoulder with her. "It's messy and frustrating, and sometimes you want to quit, but then you remember why you started. Why did you start really? Because you asked me to. Because 8 people deserve better than dying in a cell. Because the world my parents dreamed of, one where everyone has value regardless of their gifts, seemed worth fighting for." He turned to face her. "And because loving you made me want to be worthy of you." Her breath caught. He'd said things close to this before, implied it, but never stated it so directly. "I love you," he said again, clearly. "Not because we're fated mates, not because you're convenient or politically useful, but because you're brave and kind and you run into burning buildings to save people you've never met. Because you weaponize your trauma to protect others. Because you make me want to be better than I am." Thessaly's throat tightened with emotion. "I love you too, you impossible, awkward, beautiful man who builds pillow barriers and catches burning beams." He smiled, then his expression shifted, became serious, almost nervous. "These past 2 months have been good," he said, "really good. But I want more than good. I want forever." He reached into his pocket. "I know we agreed to wait, to let you heal, to build something real beyond the bond. But I need you to know I'm not waiting because I have doubts. I'm waiting because I want you to have none. I don't have doubts. None. Kaelin Nightshade, you've given me time when I needed space, partnership when I needed equality, purpose when I needed meaning. You've stood beside me, not in front of me, and let me build something of my own while supporting every step." She smiled through sudden tears. "I have 0 doubts. Then I have a question to ask." He dropped to one knee. The balcony, the stars, the city sprawling below. It was all background to this moment, to him looking up at her with hope and love and vulnerability in his storm-gray eyes. "Thessaly Ravenscar, you walked into my life during a blizzard and turned everything I thought I knew upside down. You've made me laugh when I forgot how. Made me question assumptions I'd held for years. Made me better just by existing near me." His voice roughened. "You're fierce and kind and so brave it terrifies me. I don't want to just be your mate because biology says so. I want to be your partner, your equal, your choice." He produced a ring, simple but elegant. A silver band with a stone the color of winter storms. "Will you marry me? Be my queen, rule beside me as we build this new world together?" "Yes." The word came out choked with emotion. "Yes, you impossible man. Yes." He stood, slipped the ring onto her finger, pulled her into a kiss that felt like coming home and starting an adventure simultaneously. And this time when the mate bond opened fully between them, they both felt it. Not a trap, not an obligation, but a gift they were choosing together. Freely, completely. The wedding took place in the palace gardens under an autumn sky 6 months later. 200 guests, representatives from every major pack. The full council, nobles and soldiers and common wolves, all gathered to witness the Alpha King marry his Echo Queen. The Echo Academy had grown. 35 students now. The 8 original Echoes stood in places of honor. Eloan and Isolde wore matching dresses. Cassian and Thaddeus looked uncomfortable in formal clothes but stood proud. Briar kept wiping away tears. Evander smiled with genuine happiness. Soren watched everything with careful observation. Ren stood tall, a leader bearing witness. Thessaly wore a dress the color of winter storms, silver and gray and white like the first snow of the season. Simple but elegant, her hair fell loose around her shoulders the way Kaelin loved it. He stood at the altar in formal attire that somehow made him look more dangerous instead of civilized. Storm-gray eyes fixed on her as she walked down the aisle, love and wonder written across his face. The ceremony was brief, traditional vows mixed with promises they'd written themselves. "I promise to catch burning beams," he said, voice carrying across the garden. "I promise to run into fires," she responded. "I promise to build pillow barriers when you're nervous. I promise to laugh at your control issues." I promise to love you every day in every way for as long as we both shall live. I promise the same together, always. Together, always. The kiss sealed the bond completely. Golden light pulsed between them, visible to every wolf present. The mate bond chosen and claimed and celebrated. The crowd erupted in cheers. The reception was a blur of congratulations and dancing and joy. Thessaly found herself pulled into conversations with pack leaders, with council members who'd opposed the academy now grudgingly admitting it was working, with students who thanked her for giving them hope. During a quiet moment, Kieran approached. The second had become a friend over the months, someone she trusted implicitly. Your Majesty, he said formally, though his eyes held warmth. I have news from our intelligence network. Kaelin materialized at her side. They were rarely apart these days. What kind of news? The northern border, Valdoria Kingdom, has been showing unusual activity. Kieran's expression went serious. They've been capturing echoes, quietly, systematically. We didn't notice until now because they were careful. But our spies report they've gathered at least 20. Thessaly's blood ran cold. 20 echoes, why? We don't know, but King Aldrich has been asking questions about your academy, about how you train students, he hesitated, about completed mate bonds between alphas and echoes, specifically yours and His Majesty's. Kaelin's hand found hers, squeezed. What else? A message was delivered this morning, addressed to both of you. Kieran handed over a sealed envelope. I thought you should read it privately. They stepped away from the celebration, found a quiet corner of the garden. Kaelin broke the seal, read the contents. His face went carefully blank. That mass she knew meant he was controlling fury. He handed the letter to Thessaly. The handwriting was elegant, formal. The words were polite. But underneath the courtesy lay threat. Congratulations on your wedding. What you've built with your academy is impressive. I would very much like to discuss potential collaboration between our kingdoms. I believe we have much to learn from each other. I'll be in touch soon. King Aldrich of Valdoria. That's not a request for collaboration, Thessaly said quietly. That's a threat. Yes, Kaelin's jaw tightened. He wants what we have, the ability to control echoes, to weaponize them. Or he wants to eliminate us as competition. Thessaly looked at the letter again, saw the implications. If he's capturing echoes, he's building an army, and completed mate bonds between alphas and echoes create the strongest power amplification, Kaelin finished. He wants to force bondings, create weapons. They stood in silence for a moment. The celebration continued around them. Music played, people danced, but darkness gathered in the north. We knew this wouldn't be easy, Thessaly said finally. Building something new never is. I know, but I'd hoped we'd have more time, that you'd have more time to just be happy. I am happy. She turned in his arms, looked up at the man who'd become her everything. I have you. I have purpose. I have a family and those students and everyone who's joined since. Whatever comes next, we'll face it. Together. Together, he kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. Around them, the celebration continued. The world kept spinning. But for tonight, they had this. They had each other. They had hope. And tomorrow they would face whatever came. Together. Always together. 6 months after the wedding, the Echo Academy's celebration filled the palace gardens with light and laughter. 50 students now, from across the kingdom and beyond, all learning, all growing, all finding family in each other. Thessaly moved through the crowd accepting congratulations, watching her students demonstrate their gifts, seeing the pride in their eyes. Elle Lowen had become a teacher herself, patient and kind, helping newer students find their confidence. Cassian was training palace guards, making them faster, more effective, finding purpose in service. Thaddeus led defensive operations, his gift for amplifying protection, making the academy the safest place in the kingdom. Isolde's art hung in the palace now, her visions of echo experiences helping people understand what they'd been through. Evander ran the academy's academic program, teaching everything from mathematics to philosophy. Briar commanded the combat division, fierce and effective and absolutely in control. Soren worked with Kaelin's intelligence network, his observation gifts rooting out corruption. Ren served on the council, her leadership amplification making good rulers better. They'd all become more than survivors, become builders of the future. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Thessaly stood at the edge of the celebration, watching her students, her family, everything they built together. Your Majesty, a messenger approached. Young, nervous, urgent. Message from the northern border. Commander Brent says it's critical. Thessaly took the sealed letter. Read it quickly. Her stomach dropped. Border stations report Valdorian forces moving. Large mobilization. King Aldrich has sent formal demand, grant him access to academy training methods or face economic sanctions. Military buildup suggests he's prepared to escalate beyond sanctions. Situation critical. Recommend immediate war council. Commander Brent. She looked up, found Kalen across the garden. Their eyes met. He saw her expression, crossed to her in seconds. She handed him the letter. Watched his expression go hard. It's starting, she said quietly. Yes. He looked at her, his mate, his queen, his partner in everything. Are you ready? Thessaly looked around the garden, at the students they'd saved, the academy they'd built, the future they were creating. Elowin laughed at something Cassian said. Isolde showed a new student one of her paintings. Thaddeus supervised a sparring demonstration with quiet authority. Evander explained something with patient gestures. Briar led defensive drills with fierce precision. Soren observed it all with careful eyes. Ren organized the celebration with natural leadership. They'd built something beautiful, something worth fighting for. In the north, King Aldrich's forces moved. War was no longer a distant threat. It had arrived at their doorstep. But Thessaly Ravenscar, survivor of the Silverpine Massacre, headmistress of the Echoum, the Queen of the Realm, stood ready. I'm ready, she said. We face it together, like we face everything. Together, Kalen agreed, his arm wrapped around her waist. Solid, sure, unshakable. They stood on the balcony of their quarters later that night, the city sprawled below. The academy grounds visible in the distance, lanterns still glowing from the celebration. 3 months ago, I was alone, Thessaly said quietly, broken, running from death with nowhere to go. And now I'm a queen, a headmistress, a wife. I have students who look to me for guidance, a mate who sees me as an equal, a purpose that matters. And a war coming, Kalen said softly. Yes. She turned to face him. But I'm not afraid, because we built something worth defending. And because I'm not alone anymore. He kissed her forehead, pulled her close. Through the mate bond, she felt his love, his determination, his absolute certainty that whatever came, they would face it together. Above them, stars wheeled in the night sky, indifferent to the wars of wolves, but not indifferent to love, to courage, to people who refused to let darkness win. Below the academy slept, 50 students dreaming of futures they thought impossible. 8 original echoes who'd survived the unsurvivable. All of them proof that broken things could be rebuilt, that survivors could become warriors, that hope could bloom even in the darkest soil. In the north, King Aldrich's forces prepared. Plans were laid, weapons forged, an army of captured echoes weaponized through pain and force driven mad by bonds that should never have been forged. War was coming. But Thessaly and Kalen stood ready, with their students behind them, their love binding them, their purpose clear. Whatever came next, they would face it. Together, always together. The future is uncertain, Kalen murmured against her hair, but I know one thing for certain. What's that? We'll write it together, every chapter, every verse, every impossible victory. Thessaly smiled, felt the bond between them pulse with golden warmth, felt the weight of the crown she wore and the lightness of the love she'd chosen. Then let's make it a story worth telling, she said. We already have. And in the quiet of their quarters, wrapped in each other's arms, they found peace. For tonight,